Hello, my name is Dayoung Kang, the Catholic University of Korea. Today, I will present on the rating effect of NSSI expectancy and frequency latent profile groups on the pathway from cognitive distortions to psychological distress and suicidal behavior. Non-suicidal self-injuries refer to the deliberate and direct destruction of one's own body tissue without suicidal intent. Several meta-analyses have reported that prevalence of NSSI is approximately 18 to 22% among adolescents, 13% among college students, and 5% among adults. Crucially, NSSI typically emerges early in adolescence. NSSI is regarded as a core indicator of psychopathology, closely associated with a wide range of psychological problems, such as depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Although labeled non-suicidal, NSSI has been identified as a strong predictor of suicidal ideation and suicide attempts. Thus, NSSI is early indicator that appears in the psychological pathway leading to suicidal behavior. Given its only onset, high prevalence, psychological risk, and potential progression to suicidality, NSSI is regarded as a significant, significant public health concern. NSSI cannot fully understood only in terms of frequency or severity. Its function and underlying psychological motivation must be also considered. Expectancy, a cognitive factor related to self-injuries, plays a crucial role in maintaining and repeating self-injuries behavior by anticipating its perceived outcomes. NSSI expectancy consists of five domains: emotion regulation, and negative social outcomes, communication, pain, and negative self-beliefs. While NSSI frequency reflects the severity or habitual nature of the overt behavior, NSSI expectancy represents underlying motivational and cognitive progress. Examining these two factors together provides an important basis for differentiating risk groups and tailoring prevention and intervention strategy for NSSI. Cognitive distortions distort the way the individuals interpret themselves, others, and situations, leading to negative emotions and maladaptive behavior. The effects of these cognitive distortions are also closely related to the cognitive emotional mechanisms underlying NSSI behavior. According to the cognitive emotional models of NSSI behavior can be explained by the interaction between emotional reactivity and NSSI-related cognitions. In particular, the specificity of these cognition helps explain why some individuals engage in self-injuries instead of adopting alternative emotions regulation strategies. Cognitive distortion shape individuals' expectations regarding the outcomes they may obtain from engaging in NSSI, and these expectations serve as motivations for initiating or repeating self-injurious behavior. That is because individuals differ in the cognitive goals they seek to achieve through self-injuries. The emotional and psychological consequences of cognitive distortions may also vary. Accordingly, the impact of the cognitive distortions on mental health may differ depending on the expectancy and behavior patterns of NSSI. So this study aimed to identify latent classes based on NSSI expectancy and self-injury frequency, and to examine the effect of cognitive distortion on psychological distress and societal behavior across these classes. And the following are our research questions. First, how many distinct latent classes can be identified based on NSSI expectancy and frequency? Second, does the strength of the pathway from cognitive distortion to psychological distress and societal behavior significantly differ across latent classes? The following is research method. Our study included 270 adult participation and we employed LPA and also conducted latent class model moderation analysis. And the following are the measures used in our studies. In the case of frequency, it was categorized into the following ranges, and to to ensure the statistical validity of categories, we conducted appropriate statistical test, and the result was all statistical or statistically significant. And the measures. The following is research result. First, descriptive statistics or calculated to examine the normality of the main variables. The analysis indicated that assumes of normality of satisfied, and the following is LPA model fit indices, which were calculated by increasing the number of latent profiles from 2 to 6 to determine optimal number of profiles. In the four-class model, we was selected as optimal solution. There are two graphs illustrate the patterns of the latent profiles, with the graph on the right displaying standardized score or for ease of comparison. The first type, which blue line, is the habitual behavior group, where self-injury have become habitual or severely maladaptive, and the behavior is repeated even without explicit expectancy or motivation. The second type, orange line, is the self-cognitive group, characterized by a tendency to relieve inner guilt or self-hate, and to substitute the emotional pain with physical pain through self-injuries. The third type, gray line, is the intermittent intensive group, which shows relative high functions motivation for self-injuries, but inconsistent behavior pattern. Engaging in self-injuries is sporadic yet intensive episode. The fourth type, which yellow line, is the potential risk group, showing the lowest frequency of self-injuries, but cognitive understanding of its functions and expectations of its emotional effect, indicating potential risk. The following is the result of the latent class moderation model analysis. First, the pathway from cognitive distortion to psychological distress was analyzed. This indicated that cognitive distortions significantly increase psychological distress in all classes. Mm, Notably, the potential risk group showed the highest regression coefficient. The following table presents the result of the three sub-factors of psychological distress, somatization, anxiety, and depression. Across all latent type, cognitive distortion shows a significant positive association with three sub-factors. Among four groups, the self-cognitive type showed the strongest effect, indicating the individual with a self-punishing tendency are more likely to express psychological distress when cognitive distortion were high. Finally, the pathway from cognitive distortion to suicidal behavior was analyzed. As you can see, the table specifically cognitive distortion significantly predicts suicidal behavior in the habitual behavior type and the potential risk type. Whereas the effects were not significant in the self-appointive and intermittent intensive types. These results indicated the cognitive distortion contributed more strongly to suicidal behavior among individuals characterized by habitual behavior patterns or potential risk tendencies. The following is discussion of LPA. The habitual behavior type reflect chronic NSSI requiring behavioral interventions. The self-positive type use self-injuries for self-blame, calling for cognitive restructuring and self-acceptance. Intermittent in intensive type engages during intensive stress, needing stress regulation training. The potential the potential risk type represents the early stage of NSSI, requiring early detection and prevention. And the following is a moderation model, in particularly comparisons between groups shows that the effect of cognitive distortion on psychological distress was strongest the potential risk group. The potential risk type surface behavior but has strong internal stress, unexpressed emotions, and cognitive distortion may intensify psychological strain. And the self-pointive type shows the strong links to somatization or anxiety and depression, suggesting high sensitive to emotion symptoms. When self-blame combines with cognitive distortion, distress may further escalate. The effect of cognitive distortion on societal behavior varied across latent classes, and its influence was particularly significant in the habitual behavior type and the potential risk type. The habitual behavior type shows low NSSI expectation, but high frequency with cognitive distortion, heightening the risk of suicidal behavior through impulsive emotional acting out. Cognitive, cognitive restructuring with emotion and impulse control training is recommended. The potential risk type shows high expectation but low frequency. internalizing distress. Cognitive distortion amplifies hopelessness, increases suicide risk. Cognitive restructuring combined with emotion expression training may be effective. Although these two types exhibit contrasting behavior patterns, both they share a distorted cognitive mechanism that heightens the risk of suicidal behavior. The following are implications of the study. This research provides more sophisticated framework for classifying psychological risk levels, thereby suggesting pathways for cu- customized and accurate intervention. Furthermore, they examine the moderating effect of this cognitive distortion at the latent class levels. The study provides empirical evidence that the influence of cognitive distortions on psychological distress and social behavior is not uniform across individuals, but rather varies depending on the patterns of self-injurious behavior. The following are limitations of and suggestion for future research because self-injuries frequency was measured over lifetime. In interpreting each links to current psychological state is limited. So further studies should include short-term measures to capture immediate behavior. While LPA statically classifies groups, of profile naming and interpretation may involve research subjectivity. Thus, future study should enhance validity through additional data or expert evaluation. And I'll finish my presentation. Thank you.